The Invisible Mirror, The Dark Journey of the 12 Signs of Spiritual Awakening. Part 1. The Splendor and the Shadow, the True Spiritual Mirror. Night spreads across the city, like a mist that invades every crevice, every dormant thought. Few dare to truly observe what lies beyond the silence. The protagonist awakens in the darkness, feeling something calling him out of the script. There isn't enough light to even draw his own shadow, but there is courage, embedded in the cracks of his soul, that allows him to remain with his eyes open, naked before the inner abyss. Through the silent house, he walks as if exploring ruins from a forgotten time. The floorboards creak, the wind sways curtains, his breath echoes like an ancient drum. The air smells of souvenirs, a mixture of stale coffee, dusty books, and burned-out candles. With each step, he treads on memories, a childhood marked by secrets, an adolescence full of unfulfilled promises, an adult life with pauses between discreet victories and private failures. The narrator guides, there is no awakening without crossing the darkness itself. Every closed door is an invitation. Every paralyzing fear is an unnamed teacher. In the bedroom, candles cast discontinuous shadows on scribbled walls. The protagonist approaches the weathered mirror. Looking closely, he realizes he's not just seeing his own face, he sees all versions of himself, intertwined in the reflections, what he dreamed of being, what he was afraid of becoming, what he thought was lost before trying. The soundtrack features low notes, metallic sounds, and ragged breathing. Under the dim light, anguish and wonder mingle, for only in the silence of real confrontation does the seed of evolution blossom. His hands tremble as he touches the glass. He draws symbols in the dust, circles, arrows, question marks, as if searching for portals into his own being. Cut for everyday dinners. Someone waking up under a crumpled sheet, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of it. A person in front of the improvised altar, candles consumed, lists of intentions long forgotten, tears flowing uncontrollably. Monologue invades, I had to lie to survive. I smiled when the world demanded strength. I invented versions that hid my true desires, even from those closest to me. I always thought that evolving would mean turning on lights, but I discovered that you must first accept their absence. The script becomes denser, the character gropes through drawers, finding faded letters, scratched childhood objects, angry drawings, writings laden with promises and secrets. In each trace, he stumbles upon questions never before answered. Why do I keep running away from what disconcerts me? Have I awakened, or have I just changed the guise of my fears? In a low tone, the narrator proposes an exercise: sit on the cold floor, close your eyes, focus on the pulse in your chest. Each beat is a doorway between what you fear to see and what needs to be seen. Imagine that every shame, every mistake, every insecurity are buried precious stones waiting to be rescued. Allow yourself to cry until you dehydrate and smile for no reason until your skin really burns. Let your heart speak, even if it just says, I don't know. Images cut to characters lost in the early morning. A man walks alone in the rain, allowing himself to get wet so he can feel the weight of existence. Elderly woman examines photos, letters, writing in a diary. It is in the longest night that I discover the size of my fear and the power of my hope. Young people stunned in dark streets, searching for a smile in their own solitude, inventing improvised prayers. The protagonist experiences imaginary encounters. He dialogues with past versions of himself, simulates asking for forgiveness from those who will never receive an answer, talks with voices that represent parents, partners, friends, teachers, ancestors. In each dialogue, he feels anguish and lightness, recognizing my failure is making room for real life. Giving up the role of always knowing everything is embracing the human I am. The narrative alternates between dream and waking. He dreams that he is in a desert, surrounded by creatures of shadow and light, and hears voices saying, to ascend, you must lose yourself. To find meaning, you must have an honest conversation with yourself. While awake, he wakes up sweaty, his heart racing, but with the strange serenity of someone who has finally begun to face his own story without embellishment. In a contemplative tone, the narrator concludes, "Let the night come. Allow all the pain, make room for what you never wanted to see. Only then will light begin its journey to places where it seemed impossible to exist." Awakening is knowing that every shadow contains a truth waiting with open arms. The lights in the house remain off, but for the first time, there is no loneliness. There is encounter, fade out to silence full of promise, ethereal soundtrack, images of open eyes and hands raised to the void, ready to receive whatever comes. Part 2: The Deception of the Spiritual Ego, the Theater of Masks. The house seemed in order. On the walls were certificates, travel memorabilia, and souvenirs from retreats and pilgrimages. Hardcover books on philosophy and spirituality lined a bookshelf. The protagonist, now a seeker, walks among these symbols, feeling a hidden pride in each achievement accumulated over the years. The soundtrack oscillates between low notes and dissonant arrangements, reinforcing the sense of unease. Narrator, in a critical and provocative tone, begins, "No one is free from the traps of the ego. It is the master of adaptation, capable of hiding behind spirituality, wearing robes, chanting mantras, and discoursing cosmic truths." Scenes alternate between environments. Sophisticated retreats with white carpets, people meditating in groups, eyes closed, exemplary postures. Bonfires lit on mountains with charismatic leaders giving long speeches, always applauded. Social media profiles flooded with empowering phrases, quotes from masters, photos of calculated smiles. Amidst the scene, a young man emerges. He reads sacred books, repeats teachings, but feels a void. He needs someone to see his evolution, to be recognized by others as enlightened. There is always an invisible audience, even when he is alone. A need for approval lingers, like a perfume that never dissipates. The protagonist's inner voice invades. "If I am recognized, I exist. If I am envied, I am worth more. If I dazzle, I'm being special. If no one notices, will my light go out?" Cut to childhood flashbacks. A child who wanted to be the best in the class, the most loved son, the most sought-after friend. A teenager who strives to please difficult people, take on the role of counselor, and always tell the most interesting story. The narrator challenges, the spiritual ego is sophisticated. It learns the master's dialect, knows all the rites, and masters the postures, but he runs away from a real encounter with his own vulnerability. He wants a stage, he wants an audience, he wants to feel unique in front of the crowd. Scenes of solitary rituals. Someone chanting mantras, but opening one eye to see if there are any spectators. A master instructing disciples, secretly proud of being worshipped. A digital influencer saving every new like as a spiritual trophy. The trail reveals opposing voices, honest characters, sitting on the floor, confess their doubts and weaknesses. "I meditate every day, but I can't face my most basic fears. I read about compassion, but I still judge those who don't understand me. I talk about non-attachment, but I feel sad every time I'm not praised." The dramaturgy revolves around looks. On the subway, two strangers talk about elevated topics, but each tries to convince the other of their spiritual level, while disguising insecurities. Small party, people comment on achievements on retreats, reports of blessings, trips to mystical places. The protagonist tries to break the cycle. He sits in front of the mirror and decides to confront himself. There's absolute silence. He asks the image, "How many times have I lived to be seen? Where does my desire to serve end and my hunger for approval begin? What do I do just for myself and what would I only do if others could see?" A challenge arises, narrated in a somber voice. "What if your evolution received no applause, no likes, no admiring glances? Would you keep looking? Would you accept the dark path, without spectacle?" The video proposes a radical exercise. Take a piece of paper and write down all the help, all the achievements, all the light you have ever shown. Keep it in a box, close it, promise never to show it. What is really left when recognition is withdrawn? Images of people donating time to charity without registration, caring for unknown patients, cleaning their own homes without music, without distractions, just out of humility. The narrator whispers, "True awakening reveals itself when no one is watching." It is behind the scenes that the ego struggles, yearning for reverence, but it is precisely there that the true self, the unseen master, is reborn. Seeker's conjunctive voices admit, "I felt angry when I wasn't recognized, I wanted to give up when no one praised my growth, I failed when I thought that evolving meant being better than others." At the climax of the scene, a character tears up medals, destroys altars of vanity, and erases records of deeds. He remains in the shadows, accepts silence, and seeks no audience. The epilogue reinforces rites, speeches, appearances, techniques. Everything is ruin without the humility to undress before one's own mirror. Only those who accept the ground of inner failure can climb solid steps on the invisible ladder of self-knowledge. The final scene shows only a candle lit in a dark room. Above the flame, there is no one to gaze upon, only the warmth of someone who is now able to be true to themselves and for themselves. Part 3: The Code of the 12 Signs, Portals of Self-Mastery. Facing the veiled dawn, the protagonist sits on the cold floor of a circular room where stones, crystals, dried flowers, and small objects are arranged in a mandala. Each symbol represents one of the signs that Edgar Cayce revealed as keys to knowing where we truly are on the climb of consciousness. The narrator begins in a solemn tone. There are secrets of the spirit that aren't found in books or courses, they're recorded in involuntary reactions, in small daily victories and defeats, in the way your soul communicates with the invisible world. The 12 signs are mirrors, portals, and traps, all at once. Alternating scenes show characters in everyday situations. A woman receives bad news and, instead of exploding, she keeps quiet, breathes, and searches for meaning. A man loses his job, faces emptiness, chooses to write about pain before seeking answers. An elderly man forgives his rebellious son, without demanding change, he simply offers understanding. Two teenagers face public failure and manage to smile after the fall, mindful of lessons no one taught them. The cameras pan across the characters' faces, capturing micro-expressions: shame, pride, tenderness, fear, acceptance. Overlaid on the soundtrack are whispers from the narrator listing the signs: suffering, compassion, honesty with the soul, criticism, coherence between belief and routine, true presence, search for validation, relationship with matter, forgiveness, uncertainty, loneliness, service. A collective ritual is suggested. Each character draws, with stones or clay, a symbol representing the most difficult sign to accept. They observe, respect, and then demonstrate detachment by breaking or dissolving the symbol, accepting that evolution is not accumulation, but detachment and maturation. Cut to a meditator sitting before a wall. He touches each stone and recounts past experiences. Every time I thought I was evolving, one of these signs showed me otherwise. I walked through doors, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, sometimes without the courage to even look. Internal voices echo in the environments. When I lost everything, I discovered what I was worth. When I was humiliated, I discovered my true compassion. When I lied to myself, I only backtracked. When I allowed solitude, the soul sang its most sincere song. The script explores the concept of cycles. The protagonist draws concentric circles on the ground. Each circle represents a stage of maturation. Sometimes evolution feels like regression. Light is often more frightening than shadow. Rediscovering your own fears is a sign that you are finally on the right path. The soundtrack is mixed with sounds of nature, flowing water, wind through the trees, drum beats. Night scenes intersect with morning flashes, suggesting that each sign is experienced repeatedly, never overcome all at once. The narrator administers high-impact questions. How do you treat someone who irritates you? How do you deal with criticism without an audience? Who are you in the early mornings of defeat or in moments of excessive joy? How many times do you practice what you preach, and how many times do you just preach so you don't have to practice? Images appear quickly. Deep meditations in absolute silence. People giving food without being seen. Someone forgiving in secret. A child sitting alone drawing a sun on crumpled paper. The protagonist shares reflections written in a diary. Today I failed. I judged by appearance. I ran away from criticism, but I also welcomed. I loved without wanting anything in return. I served when no one could see. Cut for intense ritual. Everyone rises from the circle. Before the makeshift altar, each person must choose a sign to observe for 7 days, without judgment. The proposal: stay attentive to details, emotions, and reactions. Learning isn't in the result, but in the process of seeing what was previously invisible. The narrator concludes in a vibrant tone. The 12 signs are not steps in a straight line, but spirals of self-mastery. Each lap is more intense, more honest. True awakening is recognizing that every lost battle is the seed of an awakened victory. The part ends with a fade out, the sound of wind and soft beats, the camera slowly panning across the mandala of objects and faces, suggesting that evolution always walks in the dark, but now with the courage to turn on its own light. Part 4: Suffering, the hidden altar of growth. It begins with the protagonist sitting on a windowsill in the pouring rain. The drops fall rhythmically, marking the time of a silent internal dialogue. The outside world seems indifferent to the inner drama. The narrator in a serious tone opens, suffering is a faceless teacher, an invisible guide on each being's journey. We are taught to avoid it, numb it, and rationalize it, but Casey said, only that which is felt fully can be transformed into spiritual gold. Close-ups reveal other characters. A man holds in his hands the news of a loved one's death. Instead of running away, he remains in the face of pain, takes a deep breath, and feels it until the end. A young woman sees a relationship end and, instead of throwing herself into distractions, she writes everything that no one will know, letters that she then tears up and burns, ritualizing her mourning. A mother receives a difficult diagnosis for her son, walks alone down the street at night, the streetlights casting long shadows on the uneven asphalt. In these scenes, time slows down. There's a radical dive into feeling, with no rush to escape helplessness. Deep cello and piano tones sustain the contemplative and somber mood. The protagonist narrates, when the pain comes, everything in me wants to run, but I decide to stay. I feel the tremors, I let the tears come, I allow the lump in my throat. I discover that to reject suffering is to double it, to create even deeper layers of fear and defense. Cut to childhood flashbacks. Character losing pet, feeling lonely for the first time. Teenager being humiliated at school, running away from his own reflection. Adult facing unemployment, learning to sit in the void without seeking instant salvation. The narrator proposes, ask yourself, when the wound came, did you judge it as punishment, or were you able to ask, what did this pain come to show me? On the altar of suffering, everything that resists grows stronger, and everything that is accepted begins to dissolve. Alternating images suggest. Silent ritual, people touch the ground, cry in silence, walk aimlessly under the dawn. The look of someone who sees grief as a journey, not a prison. Hands clasped during a crisis, synchronized breathing, shared silence. Guided exercise appears, sit with your spine straight and your eyes closed. Bring your most recent pain to mind. Don't rationalize it, just feel it, identify where it pulses in the body, give color to emotion, don't force it out, just follow your breath, creating space to welcome it in. The protagonist, in a trembling voice, explains that on the longest nights he discovers his greatest strength. I realized that my pain was not an exception, but a bridge. Only those who go through their own despair learn to see beyond fear. The narrative intersperses accounts of secondary characters. A man who lost everything and, years later, finds purpose in service. A woman who faces chronic illness and turns loneliness into art. A young man who survived violence and found meaning in embracing vulnerability. The narrator asks, suffering teaches the value of humility, forgiveness, and genuine compassion. There's no evolution without acceptance, not just intellectual acceptance, of defeats and adversity. Camera shots suggest the passage of time. Rain ceasing, timid dawn. Protagonist smiling discreetly after a night of tears, red eyes, expression of quiet gratitude. People together in silence, in no rush for a happy ending, just experiencing what needs to be felt. Closing exercise, take a small stone, hold it for a few minutes, and transfer your pain to it. Bury it in the ground or throw it into a river as a symbol of surrender. Write on a piece of paper, I accept feeling everything that life brings, and I make this my altar of growth. The narrator concludes, suffering is the raw material of the soul. Those who learn to live with pain discover that no abyss is definitive, and each sleepless night is a sign of a lively, untamed, and possible morning. The fade-out shows the protagonist contemplating the clear sky after the storm, eyes shining as if he finally understands, suffering, after all, was the secret rite of rebirth. Part 5. From deep compassion to radiant transparency. The morning breaks, gray and cold. The protagonist watches dewdrops trickle down the window. The house wakes slowly, with the muffled sounds of footsteps, a distant clock ticking away. Compassion first emerges as discomfort. The desire to escape the suffering of others is as strong as the desire to save the entire world. The narrator whispers, true compassion is not a lofty feeling, it's a sacrificial choice. It's staying by someone's side without wanting to save them, without seeking solutions, without expecting applause. Sometimes, it's just staying. Cut to a sequence of intersecting stories. A woman spends the night beside her sick mother, just listening, without advice, without rushing. A young man holds his friend as he mourns the loss of his love. He doesn't give answers, he just holds the hug. A child finds an injured bird and stays with it even though he knows it probably won't survive. The soundtrack oscillates between dense silences and low string chords, forcing the viewer to slow down the pace of emotions. Character voiceover, I wanted to heal someone else's pain to silence my own anxiety. I thought helping meant changing. I discovered that helping, most of the time, is learning to be present. Compassion does not display itself, does not convince, does not compete. It reveals itself discreetly, like a whisper in the rising tide of chaos. Everyday scenes illustrate the difficulty. A mother, exhausted from grief, rejects advice, but is grateful for the simple fact that her daughter sits beside her in silence. A man loses everything he had, but finds meaning in his friends who simply visit without judging, without trying to solve the problem. The narrator provokes, can you stand the silence of others? Can you stand to see someone fall apart without promising a blue sky? It is easy to love from a distance, it is difficult to be kind, firm and loyal in the face of anger, jealousy and abandonment that does not cease. Microdialogues present resistance. But I just wanted to see you better. I just needed you to feel with me. I don't want solutions. I'm here. I don't know what to say, but you can be sad around me. The script proposes an exercise, sit next to someone in pain, if there isn't one, imagine it. Stay there for 5 minutes, without words, without intentions. Just presence. Finally, observe your emotions. What was harder, being empty of advice or not letting go of discomfort? Suddenly, the narrative turns. Compassion turns inward, the protagonist looks at his own reflection, rehearses phrases of solidarity with himself, gently touches his face wet with past tears. I've always looked outward. When I started listening to myself, I discovered the power of forgiving myself. No one is as cruel to me as I am to myself. How about practicing the same compassion I insist on giving to the world? The script shifts to the concept of radical transparency, scenes of people writing letters to themselves, listing their shadow, envy, anger, pride, neediness. No one reads, no one judges. Honesty, even if bitter, is the starting point for any healing. Voiceover, soft but sharp, transparency is taking off your mask, allowing all the dirt, hurt, obsession, and repressed desire to come to the surface. Without raw honesty, there is no compassion possible. Flashbacks of failures, contradictions. A spiritual leader admits to envy of her own friend. A father admits he used work to escape the fear of failing at home. A young man confesses that he never wanted to be brave, he just couldn't stand being invisible. Change of track. Tone of atonement, several characters in a circle, eyes closed. Each one whispers to the wind, "I forgive you for the times you lied to me just to please me. I love you even though you're the person you never wanted to be. I promise to be my own shelter while I learn to exist in the world." The narrative ends in delicate hope. True love does not deny the shadows. Genuine compassion is accepting that everyone stumbles, everyone loses, everyone lies. And yet, or precisely because of that, everyone deserves to touch redemption. Last image, the protagonist lies by the window, eyes tired but serene, hands crossed over his chest, breathing deeply. The morning arrives diffuse, softly golden light, announcing that caring for others is, first and foremost, the exercise of welcoming oneself into one's own ruins. Part 7. Full presence, the gift of now. Night gives way to day in slow motion. The protagonist, sitting on the edge of the bed, watches the movement of his own fingers under the pale light that filters through the curtain. Each breath registers as a rare event, the chest rises, the air enters cold, circulates, and leaves warm. For a few minutes, time seems suspended, there is no past or future, only the present as the only real space of existence. The narrator emerges in a subtle voice. Presence is the secret that every seeker hides until he can no longer keep it away. There is no enlightenment without learning to exist in the now. As seductive as it may be to escape into plans, worries and memories, only the lived moment allows the miracle of awakening. The script alternates scenes. A woman prepares coffee, listening to the sound of the beans grinding, the intense smell of roasting, and the steam rising between her fingers. A child plays with raindrops, watching each one fall and explode on the ground, without distraction, without a goal. A man walks barefoot on the grass, feeling every leaf, every twig, every stone, a ritual of pure attention to the present. The protagonist tries to stay present during mundane tasks. Wash dishes, notice the friction of foam and porcelain, observe the reflection of your own hand in the water. He receives a difficult call from his brother, decides not to respond immediately, but to breathe, listen, feel the impact of the words, without rushing to resolve or judge. Inner voice echoes, "I tend to escape pain through planning, through dreams, through nostalgia, but when I stay where I am, I discover strength I never realized, a clarity that cuts through the noise. A silence that reveals answers effortlessly." The narrator proposes a practical exercise. Sit, right now, in silence, observe your body, your surroundings, and sounds near and far. When a thought about yesterday or tomorrow arises, notice it, give thanks, and return to the now. How long can you stay present without escaping inward or outward? Cut for urban dinners. Fast-paced city, people running, cell phones vibrating, horns honking, screens flashing. Within this chaos, someone stops in the middle of the square, closes their eyes and listens to the music of a violinist. Perception expands again. Exhausted workers sitting on a bus stop bench watch the sunlight filter through the leaves after a storm. Microstories show real difficulty. One character reports that he can only be present during intense pain, when the body forces the spirit to return. Another realizes that, in moments of extreme joy, he prefers to film to save the future, rather than just live. A young woman realizes that she seeks constant distraction to avoid facing the silence of the present. Narrator, in a firm, maternal tone. Presence is not positive thinking, it is not rigid discipline. It is the humility of listening to one's own body, of feeling fear, desire, anguish, hope, without resorting to the old vice of escaping into narratives. the peace of now is unknown until we stop fighting the emptiness it proposes. Images alternate between open and closed eyes, landscapes, domestic and urban environments, always highlighting details: the dust in the air, the sound of the wind in the hallway, the ticking of the clock, the smell of food simmering. The protagonist realizes the difference between being present for oneself and for others, listening to someone without thinking about the answer, without trying to understand everything at once, gives space to the emotions of others and your own, recognizing that each moment brings what we need, not necessarily what we want. Closing in a meditative tone, awakening is practice, it is everyday art, every moment brings an invitation to exist whole, anchored, surrendered. Only those who accept the present in its entirety, as it is, without escape, find the ground to build the future. The final images show the protagonist sitting alone in the park, eyes closed, breathing in the fresh air of the rising morning. For a moment, everything stops, and the silence of the present becomes a sufficient answer. Part 8: Between validation, attachment, and letting go, secret paths. The morning brings a cold light that streams through the protagonist's window, casting geometric shadows on the living room floor. He revisits forgotten awards, old photos, trophies, and accolades that once fueled his self-esteem. He holds each object, feels its weight, wraps it in a dark cloth, and realizes they were never enough to fill the silent void that always returns when the crowds depart. The narrator, almost in a whisper, leads: "How many times have you sought the approval of others as if the lack of it were a sentence of exile, the need to be seen, celebrated, recognized? It is a long shadow, which grows as the night of the ego advances." Quick cuts of everyday scenes. Someone posts on social media hoping for likes, then checks how many people reacted, and, in the absence of virtual applause, they feel invisible. A teacher who, without receiving an honor at the end of the year, doubts his own worth. A young man praised in childhood who, upon hearing criticism, feels his entire identity crumble. Parents project dreams onto their children to validate their own choices. The protagonist recalls intimate episodes: "I was a prisoner of other people's gaze. I always needed to confirm, in others, a value that I doubted in myself. I understood that the endless search for approval is like drinking salt water. The more I consume, the thirstier I feel." The script expands to material attachment. He walks into a room filled with valuables, watches, family jewelry, cherished clothes, autographed books, unread letters. How long have I let things possess me? Fears of loss, of missing out, of falling? External scenes reinforce. Person losing everything in a fire, finding relief after despair. Another, even surrounded by wealth, feels empty, disconnected from real purpose. A woman donates precious objects to strangers and notices an unprecedented lightness. The narrator provokes: being free from possessions is not about refusing comfort, but about letting go of the illusion that having things says who we are. The old world teaches: conquer, accumulate, stand out. The path of the soul demands: let go, share, delve into the essential. Transition to forgiveness. The protagonist picks up old letters, reads unaccepted apologies, and comes across names that still cause pain. Visual scene: write "I let go" on a small piece of paper, fold it and bury it in a plant pot. Scenes of people performing small rituals. A mother forgives the father who abandoned her by holding her own son's hand. Someone calls an ex-friend just to say, "Thank you for what was left," letting go of what hurt. A boy lights a candle, thanking the person who betrayed him, because he learned to protect himself from himself. Narrator: true forgiveness does not seek retribution, justice, or recognition. It is an intimate movement, freeing oneself from the past so as not to carry emotional corpses. Passage to uncertainty. Dark room. Protagonist looks and doesn't see the end of the corridor. Flashback of important decisions made without warrant. Internal dialogue arises: what if everything goes wrong? What if I'm ridiculed, rejected, forgotten? The answer is not mental, it is breathing, it is taking a step even without seeing the ground. Risk scenes. A woman moves to a new city without a job, survives on hope and reinvents her world. Young man decides to love again, even after broken hearts. Elderly man travels alone after the death of his partner, feeling fear and freedom at the same time. The narrator concludes with an exercise. Now, list 3 things that still hold you back out of fear, whether it's of lack, rejection, or the unknown, then draw an arrow pointing forward and write, moving forward despite fear. Burn this paper, throw the ashes to the wind, accept the uncertain. Fade out between delivery scenes, laughter at empty tables, hands letting go, eyes shining even through tears. The final message echoes, your value is not in applause, in possessions, in control, it is in surrender, in forgiveness, in the courage to continue without guarantees. That freedom is born. Those who learn to let go walk more lightly in the dark corridors of the soul, and discover, the next step is always a blessed mystery. Part 9: Essential Solitude and Invisible Service. The darkness of the night returns, but this time it's chosen. The protagonist walks slowly through an empty house. Each room is visited, photos of loved ones, old books, stored clothes, an out-of-tune guitar in a corner. In the absolute silence, an inner sound emerges, a calling that requires no one else's presence. The narrator, voice calm and deep, loneliness is not a sentence, it is a sanctuary. Previously seen as a void to be avoided, it is, in true awakening, a refuge for the most intimate communion. Those who endure their own company learn to hear music never played, stories never told, echoes of a vast soul, invisible on the outside, gigantic on the inside. Intercut scenes. Elderly man walking alone on the beach at dusk, footprints quickly erased by the waves. Young woman sitting on top of a building, eyes lost in the urban horizon, laughing to herself as she remembers something that is only hers. Newly separated mother quietly tidying up her new home, then dancing around the living room to a made-up tune. The script presents internal conflicts. At first, loneliness burns, a feeling of abandonment, of lack, of incessant mental noise, but as time passes, it becomes an ally. In the garden, the protagonist sits under a tree, closes his eyes and, little by little, feels the presence of his own body, the energy around him, the calm breathing, the memories that once frightened him now serving as ground for new decisions. The narrator proposes, escape from the dark room, try to belong to groups, try to distract yourself with external voices. All of this comes and goes, but loneliness is an inevitable portal. Allow yourself to exist without an audience, without expectations, without promises. Teenage flashbacks, the character trying to fit into groups, always feeling out of place, having fun only when he was truly free from the masks. Inner voice, it was in the silence of my eternal afternoons alone that I planted the seed of courage, self-knowledge and creation. Turn, mature solitude generates abundance, and thus, selfless and invisible service arises. The protagonist, now lucid, walks through the streets and observes. A young man collects trash from the square while others don't see. A woman leaves an encouraging note stuck to the mirror in a public restroom. Someone pays for a stranger's lunch at a restaurant and leaves without a trace. A child takes care of his younger sibling, without expecting recognition or thanks. The narrator whispers, real service blossoms like the discreet scent of a night flower. It's helping because you feel called, without expecting applause, feedback, or a thank you. It's donating time, energy, resources, hugs, advice, smiles, just because it's in your power, because life demands it. Microdialogues and stories. Don't tell anyone how much you suffer in secret, but be ready to help, even in your worst hours. I thought I needed to be recognized, but I discovered the lightness of acting anonymously. The script proposes a practical ritual: choose someone or a place to serve anonymously for a week, care, clean, donate, listen, without revealing your identity, journal, write down everything you felt, without seeking reward. The protagonist, in meditation, realizes, I discovered that when I give without expecting anything, I receive everything I was really looking for: peace, meaning, true belonging, and complete solitude and hidden service. I become whole. Climax visual, the empty house fills with subtle light. I in the last room. The protagonist lies on the floor, eyes closed, smiles slightly. He feels everyone he has helped and all the versions of himself as invisible company. The narrator concludes, loneliness is the womb of the new being, invisible service is the halo of those who no longer need an audience, a reward, a witness. It is a soul that has found communion in the simple act of giving oneself out of love. The final scene shows dawn filtered through colored stained glass windows. The reflections spread rainbows throughout the space, signaling that, even alone, those who serve connect with everything that exists. Part 10: Integration and Daily Practice of Awakening. The clock marks the beginning of a new cycle. The protagonist wakes before the sun, walks to the window, and observes the city immersed in silence. For a moment, you feel the exact balance between what you've already experienced and what you still want to transform. The alarm clock rings, not to initiate an automatic routine, but as a reminder of a conscious choice. Today, you observe your own path without judgment, without shying away from what arises. Narrator, in a deep and welcoming tone, the integration of signs is not a sum, nor a checklist. It is a daily gesture, a humble practice, the courage to see without makeup. A true master is not defined by great leaps, but by the patience to polish rough edges on ordinary days. Scenes of the protagonist assigning tasks to himself. Prepare coffee slowly, feeling the aroma, honoring the moment. Record in your diary every thought that arises, without censorship. Repeat mentally, I accept being an apprentice, even in tasks I already master. Images cut to a mural on the wall. Each sign is represented by an icon, a stone for suffering, a feather for compassion, a mirror for honesty, a sphere for presence, etc. Before leaving, the protagonist touches each icon and thinks, today I accept seeing what I couldn't see before. Other characters appear carrying out daily integration practices. Woman decides to spend 5 minutes without judging her own body in front of the mirror. Elderly man remains silent when receiving criticism, writing it down to reflect on later. Young man meditates on forgiveness, writing letters he will not send. The narrator proposes a guided ritual. At the beginning of the day, choose one sign to observe, not to correct, but to witness. Throughout the hours, whenever the temptation to judge or run away arises, just notice, breathe, let it happen. At the end of the day, write one line. What I saw in myself begins to move by the simple fact of being seen. The soundtrack is soft, composed of discrete piano and spaced drum beats. The gestures are slow, the internal dialogue's honest, even painful. The protagonist faces relapses. Get angry with someone, make a mistake and admit it. He feels envy, he compares himself, but he doesn't punish himself. You want to control the future, but you return to the present several times in the same day. Inner voice confesses, I'm not perfect, I never will be. I'm capable of making the same mistakes 1,000 times, but now I see without self-hatred. I discovered that by looking at what bothers me, I am already changing the pattern. Scenes show microevolutions in relationships. Spontaneous apologies. Kindness in the supermarket queue. More silence during conversations, less need to win. The narrator concludes, the journey is circular. Every day brings repeated challenges, hints of escape, slips and advances. Don't give up because it's hard, and don't get too excited when you get it right. Only those who remain observant, apprentice, present, humble, walk the path that does not deceive. End of video. The protagonist, sitting on the porch at dusk, watches children playing in the street, birds flying over buildings, old men talking under trees. Smile, take a deep breath and realize, today I was a little more truthful, tomorrow I'll go back to the beginning, starting over as many times as necessary. The trail fades, leaving only a last sound of wind, fade out to black screen, with words written in silence. Awakening is being willing to honestly see each step, again, always. Conclusion: the ascending spirit, rebirth in the darkness. Twilight colors the sky with shades of deep blue and scattered violets. The protagonist watches from the window as another cycle ends, the street emptying, the lights slowly coming on, as if each house holds secrets known only to the night. The narrator, with a warm and powerful voice, we have reached the end of the journey, but not the end of the journey. Each step, each pain faced, each shadow named, each silent gesture composed the unique mosaic of your awakening. There is no finish line for those who seek truth, only new doors, new mirrors, new invitations to the unknown. Scenes alternate between all the characters in the script. Some alone walking the streets, others in a meditation circle. Mothers singing songs to sleeping children. Young people writing in diaries, elderly people looking at photos, friends smiling as they share the silence. The soundtrack rises in an epic and tranquil tone, enveloping the viewer in a sensation of between earth and sky, as if suspended between past and future. Protagonist's voice interacts directly. If you accepted your deep nights, if you chose to gaze into the abyss without running away, if you tried to give without expecting, if you managed to be present amidst the noise of life, then you were reborn. Maybe no one sees it, maybe no one celebrates it, but the entire universe is grateful for the new heart that beats with more strength and truth. The script proposes the last practice. Before going to sleep, lie down quietly, place your hands on your chest, ask, "What moves me today that was still hidden yesterday?" Embrace every response, be it doubt, fear, gratitude, hope, and allow yourself to rest knowing that awakening is both a path and a shelter. Narrator concludes, "You are the star that pierces the nights of one's own spirit. It is the tree that blossoms after winters of solitude. It is the fire that rises from its own ashes, illuminating even those who do not know how to be grateful. The journey doesn't require perfection. It only requires the courage to continue. In the throes of the night, the truth is revealed. You have been reborn, and tomorrow, you will begin all over again, more whole, more worthy of your own brilliance." The screen slowly darkens, leaving only the image of a lit candle, flickering against the wind, a symbol that as long as there is a breath of courage, there will always be dawn after the darkness. Fade out with contemplative silence, and the subtle promise that every spectator is an invitation to the light that is about to dawn within you.